Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. If you haven't noticed, there's big changes occurring on Newport's Main Street, and today's guest is Mayor Paul Monette. He's here to talk about some of those changes. Finally, the buildings are coming down.
Yes, they are, Scott.
Did you ever have doubts? Did you ever have a moment of doubt that they would ever come down?
That they wouldn't come down?
Yeah, did you ever think they wouldn't?
No, I have full confidence in the whole project. I think it's, things take time.
Right.
And I know what they went through just to start demolishing the buildings between the lead and asbestos abatement. I know the permit process with the state. I mean, you had to get Act 250 just to tear the buildings down, which I didn't know you had to do.
Right.
But so there's been a lot of things that had to happen to get the buildings just where they could even come down.
Right. Yeah, because, then you read so much, people have this, well, how come they didn't do this? How come they didn't do that? How come they didn't renovate them? But those buildings weren't in great shape, were they?
No, they were very tired and basically old and unsafe.
Right. And old does not mean historic.
No, a lot of the historical nature of these buildings, if you're looking at some of the past photos to the current the historic nature of them had changed so much over the years, and they were changed so much, there really wasn't a lot of historical left in them.
Right. Well, it's kind of like us. We're getting old. We're not becoming historic. Nobody's going to try to preserve us. And it's the same thing with these buildings is they were old buildings. And realistically, some of them weren't even that old in the grand scheme of things. And all right, here's a bit of a slideshow of the progression of that block. It's changed over the years. Is some of the buildings, I think some of those buildings are relatively new, and some of them have had their facades totally changed.
They have over the years, because if you look at some of the historical photos, a lot of the buildings you could see had turrets, and they have really changed over the years. There really wasn't a whole lot left from talking with some of the older residents of what was there. And so it was time. I know there were people who thought that they could be saved and renovated, but even Historic Preservation wanted to know why they had to come down. And basically, they were unsafe.
And the other thing is people said, well, they should have renovated them. Well, I'm sure if somebody had gone to Doug with a better offer, I'm sure if you wanted to renovate them, he would have considered that offer. They were on the free market.
They were on the free market, but I think people, once they got to looking at the renovation cost, it was going to be impossible. I mean, with all the new standards and requirements and regulations, renovation would have been phenomenal. I think you're seeing some of that in the other building that's being fixed up. That's not EB5.
Right.
They've run into a lot of renovation issues and things. And so once you get into an old building, you discover a lot of issues.
Right. And there are a lot of memories in the buildings, but you just you've got to move on sometimes. Like, for example, a lot of those apartments above, they've, over the years, they earned some questionable reputations, but I'm sure you're aware of the fact that at one time, those were once places to live. Those were really great places because the store owners back in the early days some of them used to have their week residence up above. And so those were places for business people and such. That was back several decades ago. But then with the advent of automobiles and everything, you just have to live above your store.
That's exactly true. It wasn't uncommon for the store owners to live right above their store and place of business. And so the apartments there over the years slowly changed, and they started to go downhill in that aspect. But no, it wasn't uncommon years ago for you to live right above your store because people didn't have cars.
Yeah, and some of them had homes outside of the downtown where they'd go back on the weekends, and so now what? The buildings are coming down, and it's been phenomenal to watch them. And I have to credit some upcoming shots to Paul Dreher. that we'll be looking at later, he has been capturing those buildings coming down just so dramatically. I've been surprised how quick they're coming down.
Well, they came to the city council with the whole plan for the demolition, and they said that it would take around 3 weeks total to come down, and that they were working from the site. And if you notice, they haven't disrupted Main Street at all. They just, some of the parking spaces for safety reasons have been cordoned off, and they had Central Street closed for the one day, that first day of the demolition. And so it's a very well organized and planned demolition. And there's been, from what I can see, I was down there when part of one came down. I happened to be watching it, and very little dust. People were concerned about the dust and all that. So I'm very impressed with the whole demolition and the way it's been organized.
Right. And have you spoken to Bill Stinger, the man behind this, since they've started coming down?
Yes, and I actually was just in a meeting before here, before this program being taped, and everything seems to be progressing nicely with the demolition. He said that he's hoping the whole business plan with the EB5 will be approved by fall. They can have investors so that in 2016 they can start the reconstruction.
Okay. All right, here's a photo of what that block looked like a couple years ago. Okay, now here are Paul Dreer's photos, and I just think he's done such a great job at capturing it, and here those are.
Yes, I think Paul's done a wonderful job documenting the demolition of the buildings. It's just phenomenal to see how it's come down, and I think if in the slideshow you could see the one shot of just the great outdoors facade, which I thought is kind of interesting.
You know, there's a couple women in this community that they work quietly. They don't go out for fanfare. They actually recorded the history of that block by documents, by talking to people, is Steenie Pepin and Sandy McKinney. They're going to be their future guests on this show. Steenie knows that, but Sandy doesn't know that she's a future guest yet because she's in Florida. And they're going to come on, and they have gone over detail by detail the history of that block all the way from the beginning, and they've really documented it. And they practically live in the vault of the Goodrich Memorial Library, just picking out, documents involved with this block. So it's going to be interesting to hear their perspectives.
It will be. I know some people feel we're losing a huge chunk of history in Newport, but there's still a lot of history left on Main Street with some of the old buildings, from the courthouses to the library. We got the Montgomery Ward building and some of the other buildings. So yes, we may be losing a little piece of it, but sometimes for your community to progress, you have to move forward.
Well, you take a look at Hardwick. No, granted, I'm not advocating fires as a great way to renovate your community, but they did have a number of fires, and then out of the ashes rose these great buildings. Now, I'm not saying that your residents should be going lighting fires. What I'm saying is new buildings can bring new life. Hardwick is a perfect example.
That's correct. I don't want to advocate for any fire, Scott. No. No, we don't want to do that. But you're absolutely correct. Another community was Enosburg Falls. They had that big fire, and then a nice brick building was built, and that rejuvenated that aspect. So yes, sometimes to rejuvenate a downtown, you have to have new construction to do it. And I'm a firm believer in that. And not forgetting the past. I mean, this is all being documented, and I think the work that Steenie Pepin's doing is wonderful. And
yeah, and a lot of people, I've had people come to me and who didn't want it torn down. They said, Scott, you got to help us because you do history. And I said to them, I says, yeah, it's old. Those are old, but they're not what I consider very historic. Now, if you told me, if you wanted to announce right now that you plan to take down the Goodrich Memorial Library, that might be a different. You don't plan on tearing that down.
No.
If you went before the council and said, hey, I think we ought to tear that down, that would be a different story. Are you correct?
Oh,
Am I correct?
Oh yeah, you're absolutely correct there. I mean, as you know, I was on the board way back during the restoration of the library, and so no, that is here forever. Same as the courthouses across the street.
You know, one building that I know you might have some renovations to, just because of, you know, the breach of security that occurred at the police station, is I know there's going to be some there, but I would hate to even. Some people look at the facade of the police station and think that's kind of ugly, but if historically that was the armory.
It was, and actually, if you look at an old picture, a postcard of the municipal building or the armory, the actual facade has changed some, because on the top, some of the facade was removed. I'm not sure why, but I just happened to get an old postcard off eBay, and I looked at it and said, that's different than what's there now. So that had a slight change for some reason. Not sure why.
There's still people who refer to that as, you know, older people who refer to it as the armory.
Yes.
And I don't know about, what about your mother? Does she?
No, she doesn't really refer to it as the armory, but I know some people still do, and that actually was the standard design for the armories.
Yeah.
If you look at some other municipalities who had armories built around that time.
Okay. So when is this block being rebuilt, and if it isn't right off, what's going to happen?
For what Bill was saying this morning at the meeting, once it's cleaned up, they will stabilize everything, and they're going to put up, have to keep the fence and put up architectural drawings. They're still working on the design of the building and have that there. They do have to get the business plan still approved by the state, and then they can go after all the investors. But he has full confidence with the whole project and that it will proceed. It may take, you know, a while to get everything set, because there is much more scrutiny, as we know, on the EB5 program, which he welcomes, and we welcome it also.
You know, I read something, you know, if you see it in writing, it must be true, not. But I have read it, that they're going to, for the time being, they're going to create like a park, a grassed over area.
I haven't seen any plans for that, but I know that that's being discussed to help have something there during the transition.
I kind of think that, honestly, I know it would cost money, but if it's going to be an extended period of time, it would be kind of nice to, other than just having a chain link fence, it would be, you know, kind of nice to have something.
It will be, but it might be difficult, because you got to remember they're digging down in, and think about the fill you would have to bring in just to create a park there. If you walk by and you look how they're going down, because those buildings were below ground too, and that's a lot of fill they would have to bring in. So I don't know. I haven't seen any plans yet for.
Do you remember the bowling alley that was in there?
It was downstairs.
Downstairs. Now, do you know if they found anything interesting during your demolition, during any of it? Because like people have told me about tunnels. One building supposedly had tunnels under it for some reason.
That I haven't heard of anything like that. I know they did find a huge crack between a couple of the buildings, which means structurally that they were slowly deteriorating, even that people couldn't see. Because of course, when they got into this, these were all separate buildings that, of course, the facades made them look like one building. And so you're finding that with a lot of the old buildings. I'm going to get it slightly off track on this, but with the old bookstore that's being completely renovated, they discovered that was two separate buildings, you know. And so when you get into old construction, you will find a lot of things. And so on this project, I just want to say that Bill came to our council meeting and told us about how much material had been removed of asbestos and lead, and I couldn't believe, you know, how many cubic yards had been removed.
You know, I often, because I go way back with Bill, he's a supporter of my work, and I often think, how can he stand the pressure? Because, you know, you know, he's working up at JP, he's doing the Newport thing, and you know what is, people love to criticize him, or they love to criticize people who are trying to make change. Even I might not agree with everything with him, but I have tremendous respect for him.
I have a lot of respect for Bill, because I consider him a true visionary. He understands the community. He's lived here for over 30 years, so I think he has a vested interest in the community. And I just like his vision. It takes visionaries to make change, and that's what
And it comes
I
with
like.
pain, too.
It does. And things, as I always tell people, Rome wasn't built overnight, and it takes time for change to happen. I told someone the other day, in this modern age of technology, people expect instantaneous results. And you don't have that, with social media. It's so easy to put something out there and expect overnight results when people don't realize the processes you have to go through to get things done.
During the last couple of weeks, I was in Florida, and I stopped by Greg and Tina Bliss's restaurant. It's outside of Sarasota. And for those who don't know Greg and Tina Bliss, they own the Hoagie's chain here in Vermont and Vermont Pie and Pasta in Derby. Well, they own McAllister's now, a Scottish pub restaurant type of thing. And the community they live in outside of Sarasota virtually sprang up overnight. And, not quite, but I'm sitting out there, and it's a beautiful place. And I'm thinking, and Tina and I and Greg are talking, it's like the changes we are proposing for Newport are not astronomical. We're putting a block in, and we are extending the runway, and we're trying to get a biomedical complex in, and
I just say we're rejuvenating what we had.
Right.
It's just, I keep saying this over and over. People, with the biomedical, you're just rejuvenating what used to be there, the old type of manufacturing of ski wear. The fastest growing industry now is biomedical.
Right.
And I just happened to see the latest plan that Bill had. He sent it to me, and it's going to be a win-win. At Main Street, you're just rejuvenating an old tired block to rebuild for new retail on the first floor and nicer places to stay upstairs. And the airport, that extension of that runway, you mentioned the airport, it's actually going to be 5,300 feet. It's going to be the second largest, longest runway in the state, even bigger than Rutland. And so that is a big, huge economic driver for the area. And I mean, I look forward to the days where maybe we'll get a commercial flight again. Because years ago, we had commercial flights out of the airport. So all we're doing is that we're just rejuvenating what we had and making it better.
And I like the name, the Northeast Kingdom International Airport, is because when I know right now it's the Newport State Airport. And one of my trivia questions that I like to use at a trivia thing is, what town is the Newport State Airport in? And a lot of people automatically say, well, Newport. No, Coventry. And so I think Northeast Kingdom, is that what it wants?
It's going to be Northeast Kingdom International Airport. It has to be approved by the legislature. I know they did a survey, and they had 3 different names, and that one was the top name. And it's not unusual to change the name of an airport, because Rutland used to be Rutland State Airport, and now they're the Southwest Regional Airport.
Did you put your name in the Monette International Airport?
No, not at all. But I think, I don't have a problem with the international. Some people, I think, do, because I think it's a false sense of marketing. But in reality, that airport is listed where you can fly in from international. The only thing that changed there was 9/11 and the inspection of the aircraft. Now they want everyone to go to Burlington to make it easier for customs. But eventually you're going to have Customs and Border Protection up there, and we will have international flights coming in, charter flights.
We also had the international airport in Derby. A lot of people don't, because there's not many people alive from the 20s and 30s who remembers the big airport that was, well, not big, it was probably, in many ways, it was as big as the Newport Airport. It was on Route 111 on the left as you go out past the Derby Village store, and that was the 1920s and 30s. That was in the very early days of aviation.
That's correct.
So you touched upon the biomedical plant. Well, if people have been reading the papers, is the way I've read it is the biomedical plant is coming to a screeching halt. Is that true?
That is not true. The meeting I was at with Bill Stenger this morning, and I actually chatted, communicated with him over the weekend, that headline is totally misleading. They had to resubmit, which he was more than willing to do, the business plan. They were asked to hold off on the marketing of the fundraising until they updated the business plan. And the business plan was done in 2010-11, and a lot's changed in the biomedical field. And so they just updated the business plan. And so everything's going to get back on track. And we all know that the entire EB5 throughout the country is coming under more scrutiny. And Bill says we welcome it. And so he fully expects everything to, they want to have the groundbreaking this April or early May of the biotech and start the whole process. He says they're 80% funded. And I saw the executive summary of the new business plan. The business plan he showed me today was about the thick, 200 pages, but this was just the executive summary. And the products that would be produced here are cutting edge. And it's one, as I said earlier, it's one of the fastest growing industries in the United States and the world. And the clean room technology is going to be top notch and state of the art. And so I am fully positive that it's going to proceed.
Tell me, am I the only one who thinks there's a group of people out there that almost gets excited when they think something's failing? I read things on Facebook, and it's like, wait a minute here. You're excited that this project might fail? It's like, I read some things, or I hear things, and it's like, why is there a segment that is so doom and gloom?
I think, I don't know, I guess a lot of people always look at the cup as half empty instead of half full. I think there's a group that do not like the EB5 program, even though it's been on the books for years, and Bill's taken full advantage of it, and it's been so successful that you look at other projects in Vermont. Everyone hears about Bill Stenger and Jay Peak and what they've done with the EB5, but there are actually other EB5 projects in Vermont that are proceeding, other ski areas. And so I think people just don't like the funding mechanism of it. Just like the block on Main Street coming down. There's a group that feels that they kicked out all the people who were living there and they all became homeless. Well, that's not true. They found, the former owner of that whole block found places to live for everybody who was there. And so they didn't make all these people homeless. They found other residences in Newport for them. And so, I don't know, I just think sometimes people like to dwell on the negative versus the positive.
Right. And you know, from being a person interested in history, as you're interested in history, sometimes you read the history, you hear the history that they tell of Main Street does not quite jive with the reality of Main Street. And it's I understand everybody not appreciating every aspect of the plan, but there are people out there. You as mayor, you can't make them happy, can you?
No, I've learned that over the years. You cannot make everybody happy, and you don't even want to. You want to try, but you got to come to reality that you will never make everybody happy. And I think this is a classic case of we need the development. We need it. I'm going to put my financial side on. We need this development for the grand list to grow, because I just happened to see the tax numbers for the homestead tax rate for Newport. We have the second highest homestead tax rate in the state of Vermont, third highest non-homestead. So that's why the council is behind all this development and redevelopment, because we need to grow the grand list in order to provide the services that everybody has become accustomed to. So,
looking 10 years down the road, 10 years out, what is Newport going to look like?
10 years out, I see Newport as a thriving and bustling community like it used to be, where we had Main Street full of retail, people coming downtown. We won't have the stores of the past, the old Newberry's, WT Grants and all that, but I can see a lot of specialty shops catering to the locals and tourists, because we have to remember we are I want to see Newport become a tourist destination. Right now, it may not be what some people think is a destination, but we do have to take advantage of the beautiful lake and those resources, and we have to take advantage of everything we have to offer. And there are people who see the future of Newport. I mean, you look at downtown, and there are people who truly believe that Newport will come back. Like you said, everything has its ups and downs. Like when we were young, Newport was bustling, and then it kind of went down, and I see it coming back up.
And even amongst when Newport was bustling, when we were growing up, there were pockets of a lot of places that was not doing so well. I think for the most part, Newport is very healthy right now. You know, globally, downtown might not be the greatest looking place at the moment, but I think it's come a long ways. You know, with the state office building, with the boat houses being taken out, and I think you look back at those photos now of what that used to look like, and we're going to be looking at that block the same way when the new building goes up.
That's correct. You brought up a good point, the waterfront. I mean, it's one of the top-notch waterfronts, I think, in the state, and we sometimes forget about, I think sometimes locals forget about what we have here. You know, they forget about the beauty, and I know beauty doesn't pay the bills, and we need the jobs, and with all this development, it will create jobs that people need. But I saw some numbers this morning, and this area actually was leading the state in some retail sales numbers, gross receipts from restaurant rooms and meals tax. We actually had a higher percent increase in this area than the state, which shows that people are coming in, because we do have great restaurants downtown.
Oh, yeah.
And I know people think that people go up to J-Peak and they just stay there, but they do they do come downtown also.
Right. You know, that period that a lot of us are fond of remembering, back when Main Street was lined with chain stores. Well, it's interesting. If you talk to Ruth Austin is about 101, and I've interviewed her at length. She actually is old enough to remember when a lot of the chain stores weren't there. So she got to live through the evolution of the arrival of some of those chain stores. And so Main Street has always just been evolving and devolving, and it's Main Street USA. That's just the way it is. It's not going to go back to the way it was.
No,
it's just going to be different.
It will be different. And you know, a lot of those small chain stores that were on every main street, they went out with the times. They couldn't compete economically, and I think you're going to see a lot more small mom and pop type stores. And a lot of these stores went out with the evolution of the vehicle, and Newport's Main Street's not alone.
And the strip mall.
And the strip mall. Newport's Main Street's not alone.
Right.
A lot of main streets are having to reinvent themselves. Right. It's not just Newport.
You know, I know you've heard this many times, but I still think a parking garage, because as you know, and your mother probably remembers it, is we once had a small parking garage which was located next to the Newport Hotel in back. I think it was like 2 or 3 stories. And to those viewers who don't know where the Newport Hotel used to be, it was located where People's Bank is today.
Right.
But it would be kind of nice if you could find some place for a parking garage.
Well, we actually are gaining more parking with this reconstruction of Main Street. We are gaining more parking spaces because they will be able to park in the lot that was already in the back, but it's going to be all this parking underneath the building too. And so we will be gaining parking spaces there. And I have a spot where I could see a 2-tier parking built, but that's down the road. It's a vision that I have for one spot. I tried to get, as far as parking goes, I was new on the council when they were building the state office building. It was like my first year on the council. And I said to them when they were going to tear down the old fire station, that would be a perfect spot for 2-level parking. Right. Because it wouldn't block the view with the top level, and you could have cars underneath.
That's true.
They didn't want to do that. They thought I was out to lunch at the time. But yeah, I still thought it was a good idea at the time because it would have fit in nicely.
Right. Okay, well, we've just about run out of time. What would you like to tell the viewers?
I would just like to tell the viewers that we have to have patience with the development. Things don't happen overnight. Stay tuned for the future development. It's all a win-win for everybody, not just Newport, but the whole area. I mean, Bill's vision of the area is to make it successful and to grow not only Newport, but the entire region. And I think what's good for Newport is good for Derby and good for the surrounding communities. And so I just want people to be patient. I know it's taken a long time, but all good things happen in the end.
Okay, and Thank you for coming on the show, and congratulations on your successful run for another term. I don't know if I should be congratulating you or extending my sympathies, because you do have a hard job, and you are often the focus of, if somebody had voodoo dolls around, you have people that would be sticking pins in you, but that comes with the business.
It does come with the business, and thank you. Yes, as I start my 4th term as mayor, I look forward to an exciting 2 years.
Okay. Well, let me know when they're going to be putting the bronze statue of you up in the Railroad Square, and I'll be down here taking a photo.
No, there won't be any bronze statue.
Okay, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.